Howdy, all of you delicious people! I've got the Mummies, the first 4 episodes of Mummies Alive. So, for those of you that are to be fans of the Brendan Fraser, Tom Cruise, The Mummies films, or also are fans of Power Rangers, specifically the seasons of Dino Charge, or also the Super Sentai Japanese Power Ranger equivalent of a show also called Zayu Ranger or Ju Ranger, Ju Ranger, Ju Ranger. Yeah, that theme song will get it stuck in your brain, just like Mummy's Alive one did to me. I really enjoyed the beat of it. It was pretty awesome. Also, I'd go on and compare this show to Beetleborgs, kids that are to go on and find their favorite comic book and eventually wish from a guy named Blabber to become said superheroes and seemingly coincide with a haunted house that has a number of supernatural characters. Why am I saying all of this? Because Mummies Alive is to be a show where we have a kid named Preston who doesn't go on and get superpowers within the show, sadly. And also, it's kind of strange that they were to go on and focus so much so on Preston. But anyways, Preston eventually makes his way to a museum at one point to come to find that he is to either have the most look-alike of a man of the past, or is to somehow be a descendant or blood related or some kind of something of a pharaoh of the past known as Rapses. Preston goes on and makes his way through this museum to eventually get attacked by statues and find a villain named Scarab, who's this kind of witch or necromancer or warlock kind of character who is to find this kid and want him dead. So we then have the undead that come to his aid, mummies that are to come out of their sarcophaguses and come to his rescue. So these mummies go on and they morph from mummies to then these animal-like creatures. And I, when watching this pilot, was like, man, this idea is just so dope. I was so happy that I found this show because I'm like, man, visually this is so cool. Like, I would have loved to have had this show tweaked a little bit, because obviously you're going to care more about the mummies than you are going to care about the kid. And eventually the follow-up after the first episode is really just focusing more so on the kid than it is on the mummies. I get it that it's their target audience, but I think that's the biggest mistake, to focus on the character with no powers. And so eventually within this 4-bit of episodes, we come to find that the mummies start to advance their technology unreasonably, I guess, because they just have the ability of magic. So our mummy characters eventually make their way into a tomb as their hideout, and eventually go on to make stuff like vehicles and boats, and eventually flying like vehicles for them to use, like Hot Rod, Skycophagus, or Hot Raw, or or also Annihilator, which is a boat. So after watching the pilot episode, I was kind of mixed about my feelings of the episodes following after that, because again, you're focusing on Preston, which is a mistake. But I thought that certain things of what they were trying to execute was actually pretty clever, was pretty smart. Because we go into the second episode and we come to find out that Preston is to have been attacked by this nightmare of Scorpion, and he then goes on to be like sleepwalking throughout his life, and is to have then Preston become Rapsies in the past and find out and be familiar with the mummies through Rapsies of how they were alive once and they were real people training Rapsies and going on to go on a hunt with him and then find him missing and want to try to figure out where he is. So Rapsies, what happens to him is he is to be persuaded by Scarab to go off on this little road trip to eventually come to find that Scarab wants to go on and take Rapsies all alone to an area somewhere where he can then go on and kill him. Making it so, because the mummies of the past have all failed in saving Rapsies, that this time around they're going to go on and they're going to try to make up for that. And that's what kind of makes for a very interesting second episode. And so, while also what's going on is to be fairly interesting of the understanding of these mummies characters, because we kind of get backstories of them, which is rather interesting. So, which I wish they could have, again, focused on the mummies a little bit more by going on and really, like, having them all have, like, a fleshed out origin while Preston is to be somehow involved in their life, rather than Rapsies kind of leading the charge here. But anyways, so, because we really just focus more so on Jakal, and the rest of the mummies or maybe Nefertina is to go on and have her kind of little time in the sun, but like also the other guys, like, they're very brief and they don't really mean anything as far as them just going on and just training Rapsies, and that's about it. So we go on into the third episode, which is Pack to the Future. So this, of course, is a rip on Back to the Future because they're going back to the present day. And so in the third episode, also the reason why it's called Pack is because there's a pack of dog-like, human-sized creatures that are going after Preston within this episode while he's going on and going camping with his mother. Strangely, the weather is horrible. It's raining in this episode, as well as also neither Amanda or Preston, and Amanda is Preston's mother, don't want to go camping. They don't like camping. So why are they even going camping? Like, I guess it's just something to do. It's something to just cross off the list of something that they've accomplished. But anyways, so Preston inevitably goes on and is within this camp. And the mummies don't want to go on and follow him there because that's stupid. Why would you want to go on and do that? Like, you'd have all this real estate to go on and just camp somewhere, but you don't want to go on and do that now, do you? So the mummies go on to send their sacred cat, Conti, and they give Conti this necklace, and they're watching the feed of Preston being at this camp. And so, as danger is to arise, the mummies realize that they need to then make their way to this camp, so they get in their hot rah, and they need to find a cop for directions. So the mummies make their way to this camp to face off against these dog-like pack of men/dogs. And one of them is to be named Anubis, so that was kind of cool. And so these mummies face off against them. So let's take the time here before this last episode and let's describe the mummies and what it is that they look like, because I haven't spent enough time on that. So, first off, we have the leader, who is Jakal. So, Jakal, when he morphs into his jackal or his alternative persona, which kind of looks like Anubis in a way, but we have Jakal that turns into this wolf or dog looking creature that is to have wings, is to have this bow and arrow, and obviously very cool looking. We then have Wrath. Wrath is to eventually turn into a cobra or scorpion, or a cobra or scorpion. That's very different things. Snake or cobra. And we even come to find that Wrath can actually turn into an actual snake and attack people. And so Wrath is to have blades with him, so he's just kind of a swordsman. Then we have Armon. Armon is to basically be the powerhouse of the group. He's basically the Thing or Ben Grimm from Fantastic Four, because we have 4 of these folks. And yeah, actually, this whole entire team is kind of a ripoff of Fantastic Four without the cool, interesting powers. So it's a weaker version of Fantastic Four in a way. I just realized that. So Armon is to be the muscle of the group. He's to go on and take Shabtis, which are to be the statuesque-like characters, and just be having them kind of jump onto his back. He throws them, and they break into pieces, which is very visually cool to watch in this show. So, for how I enjoy that effort of just like, yeah, we have to go on and we have to destroy these things and have them break into pieces, I thought that was cool. So, we then have Sepertina, which I'm not even quite sure exactly how to pronounce that name. But anyways, we have the female character of the group, which they don't even realize is female until the end of the first episode, where it's like, oh yeah, like she is to actually be female of the group. And so, like, a girl pretending to be a boy, I guess, is just kind of ironic for the show, for how quite often it would seem that female characters don't do as well as far as action figures would be sold, bizarrely. But I actually love the design of Nefertina. In all honesty, though, Nefertina kind of becomes like the Catwoman of the group. She is to have this like Black Panther-esque like persona, and her weapon of choice is to be a whip. So yeah, she is basically Catwoman. And man, I'm making a lot of comic book references here, but it's basically true. But if anything, a solid good idea for this character. So, but I'm not quite sure how exactly in the past they would come to realize that this girl is to, well, I guess she is to be a rider of a chariot in the past. So I guess the whip has to make sense for her. Or so, like, good play on how to go on and have this character be justifying her weaponry. So we have these characters here, and we then have Scarab. Scarab, again, is this warlock, necromancer, witch of a man, and he is to have gone on in the past and to be stowed away onto this or this place by a guy named Imhotep, for those of you that are to go on and remember the Mummy films. So, this guy ends up getting locked away to have been freed by a guy named Harris Stone. Scarab is to go on and steal said Harrison Stone's name, take it for himself, and then go on and seemingly be funding this museum. So straight up, very much like Power Rangers Dino Charge. So Scarab goes on and eventually becomes this bug creature at some point. He kind of morphs into that. And he faces off against the mummies. And so eventually we go on within these episodes of the fourth and have Scarab call upon this elemental god known as Geb. And for some strange reason, this huge, massive colossus of Godzilla-sized thing is to just be curious who was to have gone on and woke him up. And Scarab goes on and points out, it's like, well, obviously it's the mummies. Like, obviously you should go after them and attack them, but only from the convenience of your water source that you're standing in. To me, this Geb monster looks like the rock guy from Neverending Story. Like, I was just waiting for this guy to go on and pick up rocks and eat them because of how much this looks very much like the big colossal rock monster from Neverending Story. So we come to find out in the fourth episode, the weakest part about this show of fourth episode is when the characters are to go on and face off against this big behemoth of rock-like creature. After a couple of patters here and there, they really cannot go on and make a real impact of making us believe that these mummies can be anywhere of a match against Geb, and then eventually their powers run out. So, like, it's even more so than, like, Green Lantern, these guys' characters have for their power momentum, but also it seems that this group is very limited coming up with a strategy to be able to make us believe that they can be a threat to this big behemoth of colossal size. So, if anything, for these stories, it seems that you just need a monster big enough to really be a legitimate threat to these guys here, because they're very much stymied by what they can really do here. So, even when you have characters that can fly and can go on and create all these wild, like, vehicles and weaponry, and they have the ability of magic, but yeah, like, I guess that only goes so far now, does it? So, what eventually happens here as the mummies run out of their powers, one of them ends up getting captured, who's leader Jakal, and Preston needs to go on and run off to save him by going on and starting this incantation or limerick. And eventually Preston is to figure out a way to outsmart Scarab and then be able to kind of have Geb kind of defeat himself, or Geb going on and turning on Scarab, and that's how we go on and we finish up this episode and kind of save the mummies from themselves, or save the mummies from the lack of their own just kind of power set to be any real true threat against the foes in this episode. So yeah, like, the first episode I thought was great. Even though, yeah, like, the idea of this is a little flimsy. Like, if anything, I think the better idea would have gone on and been that you'd have, like, 4 kids that make their way into a museum and go on and touch this artifact that is to go on and transform them into mummies, and then you go on and find out that like that they are to eventually have these powers and so on and so forth. But anyways, um, that would have been a little bit more interesting show. That would have been very similar to Power Rangers Dino Charge, and if anything, that would have been more entertaining. Like you could also go on to the route of having a group of kids that are to all be suffering from light light that they can't go on and they can't be even in a room with lighting, so that way they always have to go on and they always have to be dressed in layers or wrapped up, and you could have probably a good number of people all making fun of them, and they then go on to basically be called mummies, and then you find out that because of uh their light affliction, that they turn into superheroes because of it. Like that would go on and make a lot more sense to kind of approach this story, to have a unique bit of characters that are all grouped up together because of their light affliction, and that could be a much more interesting story than what is to actually play out here. But anyways, so we have me now want to go on and break down these 4 episodes in more gory, more thorough detail. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to lean in to, of course, the spoilers and deep dive down into these episodes. As far as future reviews is to go on and be concerned of me seeing where I'm going to head into this channel, I feel that I kind of want to mostly leave that open-ended because, in all honesty, like I go on and I promise these things and then I deliver something other or randomly different. I'll say that there is a number of projects that I still feel that I need to finish up or cover or whatever. So, and I've probably said those through a number of videos. I'm sure no one wants to hear the repetitive nature of me talking about all those all over again. If anything, you can go into all the other episodes of reviews that I've done fairly recently and find out what other projects I probably have in the works. But anyways, I think it's about that time to say that I really did like this show, and I hope that it will continue as a future review. But I've been doing a lot of one-off things, clearly because I haven't quite found the one thing that people are the most interested in yet, and figured out a way how to capitalize from it, in all honesty. But anyways, I had fun with this episode. If anything, after the pilot, it was kind of a mixed bag of feelings. Like, I would go on to say that the pilot episode was the strongest one, obviously, because it's the pilot. They want to, in desperation, figure out a way to best sell this show to anybody. And then after that, like, we just have kind of so-so episodes, kind of a mixed bag of me caring about them or not. But I can understand what the idea was. If anything, funny thing about this show is the origins come from a creator who was to just take his kids to the museum, and they were to go on and be interested most in the Mummies exhibit. So this show could have ended up being anything besides this. And so, really for that, like, I can probably tell that these people were just trying to make some kind of show. And were kind of carrying off the success of the real Ghostbusters because it's the same company who'd gone on to do that. So that kind of obviously tells you right then and there, like, what they were trying to do for this show is just create something other than that or similar. So So yeah, so with that said, you can go onto the YouTube channel of All About Mummies Alive and find that there are a bit of episode playlists for this show. You can watch the entire bit of this show all on YouTube right now and be able to watch it for absolutely free. You don't need a weird, goofy subscription like it does say in Google or Chrome or whatever. So with that said, I think it's about that time to get into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to get to spoil this bit of episodes. Let me know in the comments below what is to be your favorite supernatural show, what is to be your favorite mummy project, and what is to inevitably be a show that you feel is similar to this, because at the end of the day, it helps me go on and find other material. It also goes on and is to find out that people exist out there in the YouTube of things. And also, it does really go on and help out this channel with you, of course, going on and dropping down a comment. So, if you have never gone on to otherwise already subscribe to this channel, go ahead and do that also. But I think, it's about that time to get into spoilers, the breakdown of this whole entire show. So, with that said, let's get into it. So, we'd come to find that in the pilot of episode, that it all starts off with Harris Stone that is to be in the flashback of past with a guide named Yesiv. So they have a black and white screen going on here, and Stone makes his way to this tomb, and he wants to go on and make entry with inside of it, but guys are going on and telling him, hey, if you do, you'll probably end up cursed. Because Danhausen, I guess, wasn't really a thing yet. So, Stone goes on to eventually just defiantly want this thing open, because this is basically the equivalent of the movie The Mummies. So, Stone opens up this tomb, makes his way inside of it, and instead of seeing hieroglyphs, he all of a sudden sees a number of scratches that are to all be numbers and counting in a very old-fashioned of ways. Having us realize that the person inside the tomb has lived for a very long time and is just going on and counting the days of which that he's existed within this said tomb. So, as Stone turns around to look within inside the tomb, that is when he's surprised by Scarab and obviously killed off screen. And then Scarab is to go on and turn into Stone and become him. So, we now get into modern day. We have Preston that is going on his skateboard with a friend to make their way through the town, and is to inevitably make his way into this museum to find his mother Amanda, who's making this phone call talking about this lavish donation by Mr. Stone. Preston, obviously realizing his mother is distracted, takes from her purse some money, makes his way to this vending machine, and then sees the new exhibit of the mystery of Rapses. So, you would think at some point that, well, I guess they wouldn't go on and be able to figure out that, like, Rapses and Preston would look the same. There wouldn't be any pictures of Rapses. But it is kind of interesting how, of course, they're also doing an exhibit about a dead kid. It's a little strange. But anyways, so that kind of just seems a little distasteful. But anyways, so we have Preston that goes on and finds this sign of the mystery of Rapses, makes his way down this hallway, that's to be filled with statues that I will finally call Shabtis. And as Preston moves throughout this hallway, and every single one of these statues are to have these like sphinx-like heads on them. But anyways, so Preston makes his way down this hallway, and the Shabtis are to go on and have red glowing eyes that are all going on and moving with their heads, following where Preston is moving towards. So Preston makes his way to these sarcophaguses. I don't know the exact plural of this, but surely it won't matter anyways. So he makes his way to these coffins, and so Preston is to go on and find the sacred cat coffin, and is to find out what it is, because I guess there's a weird bit of inscription on it, because he's reading this off. I don't know where that bit of detail was to have come from, but regardless, it's there. So Preston goes on and reads from off of this coffin that there is to be this cat with inside of it, and he's like, man, I don't know why I'm so tearing up here, or why I am to be so emotionally connected to a cat of all things. And so he goes on and he puts the cat coffin down. We'll find that this is to, of course, be the sacred cat of Conti, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, because I don't know if I'm really pronouncing it well at all. So, if anything, there's going to be some names that I'm going to have to double check here of what they actually are, because if anything, some of these names are kind of hard to pronounce. So, because it's from like these side characters that really are to go on and and be named whatever, just for the show, but never really said what their names really are. So anyways, so as Preston gets up from after looking at this cat coffin, he is strangely Preston to just start glowing. Don't know why. This kid is not getting superpowers, but for whatever reason, it seems that he's glowing. So we have Scarab that is a call on the fact that this kid has come. And so here's where the Shabtis start grabbing onto Preston, and he gets away from them, and so they start chasing him. Preston makes his way to this security guard, and is to hope that this guy will save him, to come to find out that even the security guard is to be Shabtis himself. And forcing then Preston to make his way back into the museum, hide in one of the coffins that is empty, and then come to find that Scarab rips him away from the coffin. And so as Scarab is grabbing onto Preston, realizing that this will lead to supposedly the kid's death, we start to have these coffins start to open, and all of a sudden they burst with this blue lighting that is to go on and have these mummies come back from the dead to rescue, of course, our Preston character. So as the mummies all come out of their coffins, they yell out for the power of Ra. Not to be confused with Rom from Conan the Barbarian, because that's not the same thing. So we have these mummies that call upon the power of Ra, and slowly but surely they all morph into their animal-like costume of wielding power. So, and at some point, like, we have one of the characters where like their necklace glows, and then like they become the Black Pantherish cat of which that we see here. So as the mummies all get the powers, the first thing we see here is the Shabti security guard ends up getting a whip to his legs and destroyed. Wrath ends up going on to slice through some Shabtis himself, and Armand, who's the powerhouse, goes on and has these Shabtis jump him from behind to where he goes on and flings them and crushes them, which is, again, a very interesting visual to just see when these statues just get destroyed. I love that bit of effort, and like I really appreciated like the animators going that extra mile for how I know how probably difficult that visual probably is. So we have Jakal. Jakal goes on and does these kind of like massive flips of things. And while I was watching the actual fighting these characters, I couldn't help but match it up with stuff that I've seen recently, like Power Rangers, Alien Rangers, where like the fighting in those bit of episodes was so visually entertaining. And so we'd have Jakal that goes on and kicks and bursts through statues. And so as the more of the mummies start to gather together in one area, because eventually we'd have that Armand and Nefertina are to go on and kind of be on their own, and then Raph will kind of join them here shortly. We then go on and have them continue to take down more Shopties, more statues. So we'd have Jakal, who ends up more so in these 4 episodes than anybody else, wanted to continue to figure out ways to fight Scarab, the villain of this story. We'd go on to, of course, have Jakal, who's to use these arrows against Shabti, and that's what morphs Scarab into this bug-like form of things. So we find Scarab that goes on, and he lights a roof hole for him to grab then Preston and fly out of this area. But then we'd go on to have Jakal, who does another fire of his bow and arrow that has Preston fall, and Armand catches him, letting him know that he is now safe. So as Jakal lights up another bow and arrow, we have Scarab that goes on and uses his energy power, and the two kind of hits kind of counter one another out. We then would go on to have Scarab try to escape here, and we then would have Preston realizing that these mummies are to be the good guys to, of course, Scarab's villains, having us, if we were to be confused as viewers, who these people are, to kind of clarify here. Also, to me, like, this could go on to be very similar to, obviously, projects like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. When you look at Scarab, he kind of looks like a Foot Clan-like person. And when you go on and you look at these characters and there are certain very colorful costumes, you can make obvious comparisons to Ninja Turtles. Except for the Turtles don't morph into anything. Well, unless you are to go on and read the Power Ranger comic books, of which that they are to be crossovered with, then that's a little bit different. Anyways, so as the mummies are trying to track down Scarab, and here's the weird goofy thing about this pilot, which I thought to be funny. They take their sacred cat and they chuck him up in the air to have him to be launched onto the roof of this building for him to somehow be able to have this bit of mummy wrap that is to be as a rope for then the mummies to go on and be able to use to climb up of to get to the roof. And that, I was like, that is so... That has to be the comedy of this show, because I'm just like, what the... Like, this cat is like, with his nails, and having to go on and basically carry the heaviest of this group, Armand, up this rope. And I just thought that was freaking comedy. That was pretty funny. So we then cut to cops being called to this museum and reporters going on and giving us the news about what is to have happened in this museum. And the mummies are on some locale very nearby of bushes, and you call it to realize that the threat has dissipated or has disappeared of Scarab. So they unmorph back to their mummy like personas. And we of course go on to have Preston, who is to look at them and be like, well, hey, like, if anything, you guys being mummies kind of gives people kind of the wrong visual impression of you. Why don't you guys just go on and just look like your alter egos, these costume characters, all the time? And the mummies go on to explain that they only have a certain amount of energy or power source that eventually needs to go on and be recharged. It's kind of like the Green Lantern universe, where at some point the Green Lanterns can only use their power rings for a very limited time, and then they have to call upon their magic lantern by a oath to go on and get their, of course, power back. And so the mummies kind of have their same thing where they have to go on and they have to sleep in these coffins to recharge their powers to eventually be able to fight crime again. So, which I thought was like a good idea, but also it's just like, okay, but when these guys go on and go up against more incredible threats, like, how are they going to go on and up the ante of their powers to, yeah, like, it, like, once you go on and have them fight against, like, kind of very common, like, foot soldier level crime, like, eventually when you need to escalate things, like, there is no way for the mummies to escalate their powers. It just, like, we start to eventually at some point see the glass ceiling of what becomes this show. So Preston goes on and takes the mummies to his home, but inevitably goes on to realize how bad of a decision this technically is. As Preston goes on and takes the mummies to his house, and he starts scarfing down and emptying out his fridge, and then we have Amanda, who is Preston's mother, who goes on and makes her way also to the house, having the mummies then realize, yeah, we probably should not go on and just live with Preston in this home because it doesn't soundly make sense. So the mummies go on and they realize that they probably need to go on and find their own hideout, their own home in this tomb that is to be of a sphinx to really just be their hideout. And eventually in other episodes, we'll come to find that they're to need to save their hideout from its own destruction. Because wildly, these bulldozers are coming in thinking that they're just destroying the Sphinx, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me. But anyways, so, like, why would they destroy a monument that's been there forever like that? But anyways, I guess it does happen from time to time. So, but anyways, also, as the mummies are in Preston's house, the mummies are to have assumed that Nefertina was to have been a boy because it seems that she is to have always been disguised as one. And then when she goes on and takes off her headdress and is to reveal that, yes, she is a female, they're like, oh, okay, well, like, I guess we always have to at least have one female character in most shows. because feasibly also, like, we'd always come to find that it seems the girl figures don't sell as well as the boy figures. That's stupid, but if anything, that's just the way the cookie crumbles, and the ways of toy merchandising, strangely. But if anything, I actually like this female character more so than I do a good chunk of the other mummies. Like, I like her, and then I like Jakal. Like, obviously the leader. Um, like, they're just visually very interesting, as well as also Jakal has like a really cool power set. Like, Wrath just goes on and just turns into a snake, and Armand is just the muscle guy. Like, you would think that would be the guy that I'd be most intrigued by, but if anything, no, he's just like a dumb hulk of a man that just is not interesting enough. He's kind of maybe the comedy relief, but anyways. So, uh, so at the museum, we'd have Amanda. Amanda is looking at the destruction of the Shabtias, and they have no idea how they're going to go on and how they're going to repair or fix or what they're going to do with any of this. And Stone comes in with a $10 million check to just give to these people and says, like, hey, here you go. Like, we'll take care of all the damages, and we'll be able to have you figure out what you can do with this museum. So Jerry and Amanda are in such a relief that Stone is willing to donate this kind of money. And so now we get to where Amanda comes into the house and comes home. So Amanda is to go on and scramble and try to find Preston because, like, well, yeah, I've been home with him the whole day, and I'm going to explain why I was so late. So Preston scrambles the mummies into his room and has them watch TV. So these mummies have never gone on to see TV before. So if anything, they're very confused by it, and there's several times where Wrath is having to explain to, of course, uh, Armand about what a TV is or what other things are, like a cell phone and other kinds of things. And every single time, Wrath is to go on and say that it's too complex to want to try to explain to this guy, because I think that Wrath doesn't even know. So Wrath is to go on and just have this endless joke of him needing to explain technology to a person that he doesn't even know what it is himself. Um, but I guess that's just the continuous joke that keeps looping into every one of these episodes, that Raph has to go on and explain some kind of technology, because I guess he's the tech guy. He's the one that kind of creates Hot Raw and Skycophagus and Annihilator, but he is to go on and turn to Armand and just be like, I can't really explain to you what a cell phone is or what a TV is. So as Preston makes his way to Amanda, that's when the sacred cat, Conti, is to arrive. And so Preston ends up kind of scrambling the cat from behind him. Because this cat is like a normal cat. It's not like a cat that like has human features and is smarter than a normal cat would. No. But anything. So, and I thought that, like, if anything, the Red Lanterns from DC comic books, they would go on and they would have this one blue cat that becomes one of theirs, and I'm like, all right, like, this kind of reminds me, this sacred cat, of that character. And I was like, man, this is actually kind of cool. Like, also, this cat ends up becoming like twice its size, so that's its like special ability. But if anything, in the third episode, that whole him going on and becoming bigger doesn't really benefit him, uh, because feasibly there's too many numbers game that kind of goes in the works there. Anyways, so we'd go on to have Preston talking to his mother, and the mom goes on and brings up about this pie and then looks into the fridge and realizes that a number of things are just missing. So Amanda just goes on and tells Preston, it's, well, yeah, I guess we're not going to have that pie because, yeah, it looks like you've eaten it all, accusing Preston of just kind of overeating here. So as Preston makes his way back to the Mummies as they watch TV, we'd all of a sudden, as Preston makes his way to the telly, finds that the guys are watching this show, that Jakal is to call out that Preston is in danger by what they're watching, and Armand destroys the TV, not understanding what this is. So Preston goes on to be looking at his smashed TV, and so Preston is to find out from his mother the aftermath of the museum inevitably going on and getting destroyed. Coming to find out that the mummies' coffins are getting transported elsewhere. And so Preston has to explain this to the mummies, that there is going to be a truck that takes away their coffins, and they need said things to be able to recharge their powers. So we have Preston that goes with the mummies back to the museum to this delivery truck, and they make their way into this car. Nefertina drives, of all people, but I guess the kid doesn't know how to drive this car either. Uh, so, but if anything, it makes honestly sense out of everybody for Nefertina to be the one wielding this vehicle, because she is to have been the one riding the chariots in the flashback of past. So I guess since she is to go on and be a driver of sorts, she has to go on and figure out how to drive the more modern car of things. So they have an issue getting into the car, but of course Wrath ends up using his magical powers to be able to get inside of it. So, excuse me. So it's kind of funny how Preston has to go on and explain to Nefertina what this car is, and she's like, well, where are the horses of this vehicle? It's like, well, the horses are inside the car. It's horse powered. And so she's like, oh, so there must be tiny horses living inside this car. Anyways, so at one point, as the mummies are driving crazily, we'd come to find that they're almost going to run over some kid. So Nefertina goes on and takes this whip onto this pole, and is to then swing their way out of the danger of running over this kid, luckily just in time. But a weird visual choice for the show. So accidentally what happens also is that the mummies all fall out of the car, and they have to run and chase after the car, which I thought was funny. So Nefertina has to go on and like put the brakes on the car to give the mummies time to get back inside of it. And then, of course, Preston tells the mummies to always wear their seatbelts. So we'd go on and we'd have Stone, who goes on to speak with Heka. That is to be this this golden cobra staff that is to the head of it be talking to Stone. And so as Stone talks, or as Stone or Scarab, talks to Heka, and them talking about them trying to get rid of these coffins for the mummies to be defeated because of them not having their way of recharging themselves. We then cut to the mummies getting on top of this delivery truck on the roof of it and ripping a hole inside of it, and then they all go on and they make their way into their coffins. As in the background, we come to find that Scarab is making, with the Shoptees, their way to this delivery truck to try and take it from these delivery drivers. So, just in the nick of time, as Scarab is going on and trying to get to these coffins and finding Preston nearby and surrounding him, that's of course when the mummies call up for the power of Ra and all go on and turn into their animal counterparts. To me, also, this show is to kind of feel somewhat similar to Double Dragons or Double Dragon, in a way, except for like these guys don't have these necklaces to combine and then turn into these things. But if anything, also, yeah, like immediate comparisons are probably to be more to Power Rangers Dino Charge in so many ways, for how they have like the energems and whatever and what have you. But anyways, so we go into the action. So, of course, Jakal is to light up the Shoptees with his arrow as Armand is going on and powerhousingly throwing and destroying these Shoptees. Then we'd go on and we'd have Wrath. Here is where Wrath goes on and is to, I think, be grabbed by one of the Shoptees from behind. And here's where he goes on to morph into this snake and is to grab the head of one of these Shoptees and basically destroy it off and just start to chomp down on it. So, oh no, I guess that happens a little bit later. But either way, like, Wrath goes on and turns into a snake and rips off the heads of one of these guys and chomps down on it. So Wrath ends up getting grabbed from behind and is desperately asking for the help of Armand. And eventually Armand goes on and is to help Wrath in a very poor like way. And so Wrath is just kind of like, well, yeah, I guess when it comes down to a guy that doesn't have any smarts, he's just all muscle. So Jakal whips out his wings and slices through these Shoptees, which I thought was a really cool idea. Like, I would come to find that this show did have a action figure line, which makes no sense to me, because if anything, they only had one season of a show, as well as also, like Static Shock, who went through 4 seasons, couldn't have gotten a toy line, and then the show got canceled shortly thereafter. I'm sure there are random bits of toys somewhere of this Static Shock, but if anything, yeah, it's kind of strange how this show got a toy line, but then things like Static Shock didn't. I'm a little confused about that. But anyways, so I guess this show was specifically put together to have a toy line, whereas Static Shock was to just go on and just try to put up some entertaining telly, I guess. So, anyways, so after the mummies are going on and continuing to fight the Shoptees, we then would have Preston making his way into the car with Nefertina, and both Jakal and Wrath are making their way onto the top of this delivery truck. So we would have the Shoptees making their way inside of this delivery truck, ripping off the back of what is to be the door to get inside this as Armand uh, gets his way inside the truck to force the Shopties via his fist to get out of there. So we have Wrath and Jakal that are fighting on top of the truck, these Shopties, or Shabties. So a bit of interesting action going on here. It's kind of cool to see these guys kind of in close quarters fighting off here. So even one of the Shopties try to go on and try to grab Nefertina, and she goes on to use her claws to fight against them. So Preston is to somehow have his door get open and him flying out of it. And so Jakal needs to grab on to Preston to save him and drag him up onto the top of the delivery truck. And shortly thereafter that, we then have Scarab with Preston. And what inevitably ends up happening is that the mummies go on to figure out a way to get rid of Scarab and have him fall. So, and it looks like he's falling from this bridge. I'm a little bit confused there. So, obviously. So, as Preston is to be made his way back home, Preston goes on and asks the mummies what are they going to do in order to live, because he makes the suggestion like, well, hey, are you guys coming back in? And the mummies are like, no, I think we need to find a base nearby. And so that's what goes on and ends the pilot episode as we cut to this Sphinx tomb, of which that is to be seen off in the distance. Again, great theme song this show really has. If anything, like, as I was watching this, I'm like, god dang, like, this theme song is so dope. And I was to go on while watching the show and just be like, man, like, this theme song is gonna get freaking stuck in my head. And luckily, like, after going on and doing some rest and whatever, like, it kind of got out of there. But I'm like, god dang, like this theme song is so catchy and I really like it. So into the second episode, Sleepwalk Like an Egyptian, we'd have Preston that goes on to find the mummy's tomb or lair, and he is to be given this key card by the mummies to get in this tomb. And so Preston gets ushered in by Jakal to eventually have both Raph and Armand be working on Hot Ra. So we'd go on to have the mummies that give Preston this necklace and explain that whenever Preston is in danger, they can know because of this necklace. As well as also it seems that this amulet is to, of course, glow. So we'd go on to have Nefertina that is to make her way into Hot Ra, and she's going on and eventually driving it. But then there's a kind of a miscue going on where eventually, like, it's very difficult for her to go on and figure out at first. But anyways, so we cut to Scarab talking to Heka, and so as they're talking, they figure out about what to do for this episode by going on and coming up with a nightmare. So this nightmare comes into a form of a scorpion that's purple. And so we'd also come to find, instead of Scarab doing the dirty work himself, Scarab is going to go on and use his own shadow to deliver this scorpion, which is just kind of strange, but that's how this episode works. So Preston comes to find outside of this tomb that bulldozers have made their way here to try to destroy this Sphinx-like tomb. So Preston runs to the Mummies to let them know what's going on, that these bulldozers have arrived. The Mummies don't understand what a bulldozer is. They're like, hey, what are bulls doing here? So I think they call it a dozer of bulls or something like that. It's very strange. So as the Mummies make their way outside, they find the man in machines, and Jakal goes on to basically scare them by morphing his face into a monsterish like creature that is to scare them, and so has them run off. We then have the Mummies, as they all join together to figure out what's going on. They ask, like, well, hey, where are the bulls? Like where are they? And Preston is like, no, like, this is what I was talking about. Like, these guys are going on, and they're trying to destroy this landmark. And the guys are like, well, how can we prevent that? Because obviously, like, this is going to be our lair. Like, we can't have it be destroyed. So Preston realizes that the only way that they can save the Sphinx is by doing a protest, and for also to have the Mummies have a way to discreetly be out in public by doing this protest. So they're all going on and wearing their mummy wraps. Preston is. All the other mummies are already wearing theirs. So the news is covering this protest of these signs that say "Save the Sphinx," and so Scarab is watching this feed and realizing, like, oh, okay, well, Preston is there. This will be the perfect time for me to go on and unleash my shadow and send this nightmare of Scorpion out to get Preston. So, as this protest is going on, and Jerry and Amanda are realizing how much that they can possibly benefit off of this protest. So, or how much they can go on and kind of persuade these people. So, as Preston is going on being a part of this protest, we have the shadow that appears from behind him, a scorpion stabbing into his neck. This feels very Spider-Man-ish without Preston getting any powers, because of course he doesn't. So, as soon as Preston feels the sting of the scorpion, he all of a sudden is to start to yawn and become very tired. So, the next thing we see is Amanda making her way to Preston and going to his room, to come to find that Preston is so very exhausted and tired that he is to find his way into his bed and is now sleeping. So, we have the following morning where Preston wakes up sleepwalking, but he is Rapsies. So, everything that we'd go on to have Preston do is trying to match up with what Rapsies is doing in the past, kind of word for word, or like it's very weird how they're going on and they're trying to match up present day with the past. But anyways, so Ramses wakes up in the past to make his way uh, to his pyramid of home, and Amanda is waking up Preston in the present. So Preston is going on and to have made his way to the dinner table, and he's talking nonsense to his mother because he's talking nonsense to everybody. None of them really understand what the heck he's even saying. So Ramses is to make his way in the past to this table to talk to his mother, who is Nubia, and so they have a bit of conversation here. So Ramses is to need to go to school, or Preston is to technically be needing to go to school. So, because Ramses is going to go on and get trained by all of these mummies of how to fight and what have you. So, Preston is to run off to get to this bus, and he goes on to sit next to this girl on the bus, and Ramses in the past is to go on and sit next to Nefertina and say to Nefertina that he knows that she's a girl, but if anything, like, he'll just kind of let it go, um, and just kind of allow her to go on and just ride this chariot. And so Preston on the bus is pretending to ride a chariot, and the girl next to him is very baffled and confused by all this, but also causing a little bit of trouble on the bus. So Ramses in the past is to make his way to Wrath. So Wrath, of course, to go on to tell Ramses or teach Ramses how to turn a staff into a snake. Because again, this guy just loves snakes. So we'd find in the present that Presley has made his way to this class, and Presley is going on and spouting nonsense and talking incantations that eventually has his teacher that has this stick and he's waving at this chalkboard. Eventually, the teacher is to kind of look out at Preston and is to eventually realize that his stick ends up turning into a snake wrapping around him. So now we have Presley or Preston, Presley. Have I been saying that wrong this entire time? I don't know. If anything, I'm probably to kind of be ballparkingly close. Anyways, so my apologies for incorrectly saying that name. I'm not going back now. If anything, these names are very so early to me, so I apologize if I ill pronounce any of them. But anyway, so, and if anything, Preston just sounds better than Presley. So, so we have Presley that makes his way to Armand, and Armand is teaching him how to fight. So, all of a sudden, in a modern time, Presley is to be going on and doing poses as if he's fighting, and there's a kid that is to, of course, be bullying Presley for how stupid he looks, and is to just start making fun of him. And eventually, this kid grabs Presley from behind, and Presley goes on and takes this kid and flings him over his shoulder, and is to basically copy and paste what Armand does in every one of his episodes. So somehow Presley is to even outpower a massive man like Armand and throw him into this jar, this vase of massive size. And then we, of course, have Rapses that is making his way to Jakal. So, Jakal is to say to Rapses, hey, like, you and me will go on this hunt together, and I'll test your skills. So, as Rapses is to prepare a bit of change of clothes for this hunt, this is where Rapses stumbles upon Scarab, and so Scarab grabs Rapses and explains to him that they need to go on a ride together. And Rapses to explain to Scarab, it's like, well, I need to tell Jakal where I'm going. And Scarab's like, no, 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 no. Like, if anything, like, you need to come with me because your father is in trouble. So, or something along those lines. So, we now have Jakal that is to make to his way to his wife and baby. And so, as the two of them kiss, and eventually Jakal is to talk to his wife, a woman runs in and is to explain to Jakal that Presley is to have disappeared. So we then cut to present day as Presley is to seemingly be walking his way to the Scarab, as we come to find out in this episode that the amulet that Presley was wearing was to disguise his scent, or disguise him from being able to be tracked by the Scarab. And now Presley is making his way to the Scarab, and so Scarab is like, okay, great, like, I'm gonna go on and I'm gonna get Rapses and I'm gonna kill him. Yeah, this is great. So the mummies in modern time are finding out that Presley is in danger, and so they realize that they need to run off to save him. But if anything, they have to figure out where he's going. So we have Scarab and Rapses that are to make their way to this cliff, and Rapses is calling out for his father, and so we have the mummies that are disguising themselves as these people within this Sphinx protest, so that way they can make their way through town without being noticed. So, uh, as Rapses makes his way to Scarab, we'd go on to have Preston, who is to make his way to Scarab in present time. So the mummies make their way to Scarab, and we have the Shopties that go on and surround them. So the mummies all call out for the power of Ra, and they start taking out the Shopties. So trying to figure out what next to say here. So we have at a point where Scarab actually turns into the bug entity and faces off against Jakal, and Jakal ends up getting smashed at kind of like the edge of this roof. where there's like a bit of this kind of um, little bit of a slice of a little bit of a wall, and Jakal like falls onto this wall and kind of breaks some of it. So as Scarab is going on and hovering over Jakal's body, we'd have a number of the other mummies that are going on and continuing to fight these Shabtis here. So we'd eventually have the mummies that regain Preston, and they save him and they make their way back to the hideout as the mummies are all going on and watching this television. So Preston makes his way to Jakal and is to reminisce about his past, to have seen it himself. And so Preston is to mention about Jakal's wife and kid, and Jakal is to be completely fine of leaving his wife and kid behind, because if anything, like Presley is to go on and inevitably feel to Jakal like his son, in a very estranged way. Um, and there is that connection there between the two of them. But anyways, so Jakal is to be very upset by the end of the episode that he had not been able to go on and save Rapsies, but he promises that he'll go on and he'll save Presley, that this won't happen again. So the episode ends with this kind of emotional moment here, and then we cut to Pack to the Future. So we find that Scarab is to have been taken in by Emotep, who I guess is to be the next reign of Pharaoh here, or whoever is to be kind of like the king or the guy who has the throne. And so Emotep is to have taken Scarab and forced him into this tomb. So we find out what was to have gone on and happened to Scarab. So Scarab goes on to have been captured into this tomb to rot and to eventually lose his tan and become ever so pale. And so, as Scarab goes on and talks to Heka, they're to come up with yet another plan. And so we have Presley that is to go on and make his way through his day, and there seems to be a dog outside. So Amanda is going on and talking about this dog, and eventually we cut to Preston making his way to the mummies. So the mummies are going on and watching the weather, and they're saying about how it's wild how this guy is going on and being able to predict the weather. And Presley goes on to explain to the mummies, like, well, it's always very foggy during this time of year. So so the mummies go on to realize that they can't go on and always protect Presley, that he may always be in danger. So if anything, they're going on and looking at their sacred cat, Conti, to be the one that is be following Presley while he goes on and goes camping within this episode, because the cat is going to go on and have this very specific necklace that watches over Presley at all times. So Armand tries to find the sacred cat and chase after him, gets then said cat because eventually the cat slips on some oil, and they give the sacred cat a necklace and have the cat follow Presley around as Jakal arrives to drop off the cat. So, whoops. So we then go on to have Presley that makes his way to the car with a bunch of camp equipment on top of it. And so Amanda is kind of upset that Presley was to have gone on and kind of jerked his chores. But Presley was to go on and say, it's like, well, hey, I was busy talking with some friends, and that's why I didn't go on and I didn't do my chores. So Presley and Amanda drive off as the sacred cat, jumps onto the car to try and follow along here. So as Amanda and Presley are driving off, we then have the scarab that calls upon these four dog like creatures. One of them going on and being a Nubis. One of them is to be called Set, I believe. And there are others who go, I think, by uh, Uptopped and Kahenti, I believe, is their names. If anything, it'll be very effing hard to go on and remember all these. So if anything, I'm just gonna have to figure out how to say any of these names because they're incredibly hard. But if anything, with them all being a group lumped together, most of the time I will just call them the mutts or dogs. So whenever I am to go on and say that, that's what I am referring to this group of guys. There is also one of the dogs that last past this episode that is to be called the mutt, and I may get people confused by classifying Demut and the rest of the group here. So if anything, I might just say dogs just to be safe, and then when separately Demut is by himself, like you'll get what I'm saying here. So as Scarab calls upon this group of dogs, and they sniff the clothing of Presley to track him down, we then have Jerry making his way out to find these dogs, and Jerry's mentioning about how like he's kind of lost his mind. So we have Demut that makes his way here and is to find a hot dog stand and steal a bunch of hot dogs. So we have Presley and Amanda who make their way to this camp to set up fires and eventually find out that they're kind of getting rained out here. So Amanda is taking extra precautions because of the weather to kind of lace their tent so that way it doesn't get too wet. So, uh, so as the mutts make their way to this bit of camp area, we'd go on to have Presley talking to his mother Amanda. And as they're talking, they mention how both of them don't really like camping, but they're just doing it anyways. So we have in the background that the sacred cat is to be underneath the car with this necklace watching on as the mummies are watching this feed. So Presley is to go on and overhear some commotion, and inevitably is to look out to see what it could possibly be, assuming that maybe Presley is to think that maybe the mummies are going on and to have followed him out here. But anyways, so as Presley starts looking around, he does find uh Conti grabbing the cat and starts to then look around, and all of a sudden he is to be surrounded by these dogs. The mummies are to go on and watch this feed and realize, like, oh, Presley's in danger. We have to figure out where the Yosemite camp is, and how are we going to be able to go on and do that. Wrath goes on to this pyramid of uh of a thing that goes on to answer their questions because it has some magical properties. So Wrath goes on to call upon it, and it basically tells them to like get in your car and eventually ask a cop where to go. So they all get into the hot raw as we of course have Presley and the Sacred Cat being surrounded by these dogs. So what eventually happens is that Set ends up getting a phone call from Scarab as Presley and the cat end up kind of scrambling away from them. So we then have the mummies. The mummies go on and they end up getting stopped by this police car. And as this cop goes on and looks at all these mummies and just kind of weirded out by this, he goes on and hands him a speeding ticket, like they're going to pay that. And the mummies go on and ask this police officer, like, well, hey, where do we go to this Yosemite camp? And so he goes on and explains a direction. So Wrath is going on and saying that the guide of which that was to be given them by the pyramid is to be a thing that they can now trust and realize that it's true. So uh so as the hot rod peels off, we have the cop that is just baffled by what he was to go on and to have seen. And so now we cut back to the camp. So Presley and the cat are to make their way onto this tree, hoping to get away from Demut. So Demut is to eventually go on and break the tree, forcing then Presley to fall into this water, and we'll find both Presley and the cat will go on and be ever so close to this waterfall. Because what happens is Presley is to find himself in this water, realizing he's going into this waterfall. And so the cat, Conti, goes on to lay out its wrapping into a rope to have Presley grab onto it so that Presley can go on and climb his way up to this tree to be saved from this cat. And that's what happens, because the cat somehow is to have gone on and made its way to this tree. So Presley and the cat are running off, and they realize that they are to run to a cliff. And these dogs are starting to surround them. The cat goes on and turns from a cat twice its size, and as the dogs start to surround both Cat and Presley, we would go on to feasibly just have Presley realize that this cat is not quite big enough. Like, can you become bigger? No. So what ends up happening as Scarab and the Shabtis arrive is eventually, as the cat tries to go on and protect Presley, the cat falls off the cliff to where then Presley jumps after it to try and stop it from falling off his sledge. So Presley's on the lip of this cliff trying to drag this cat back to save it, and the cat turns back into its smaller size, so then Presley can go on and lift it up because the cat is just far too large. So as Presley saves the cat and faces off against Scarab, here's where finally the mummies arrive from their hot bra. So Presley gets inside of the Hot Ra as Hot Ra goes on and has this weaponry to it. There's at one point where Scarab goes on and gets hit by the front of this car as the front of it has this a strange like projectile that kind of pops out of the front of the car. So Presley gets into the car with the mummies, and as the mummies get away with the Hot Ra, we come to find that the villains are going on and attacking this car as it runs out of juice. So they go on and they say that it's like run out of battery. So the mummies realize that they have to call for the power of Ra. So they all turn into their super suit counterparts. So we have Armon that goes on to we have Jakal that goes on to fire off some arrows at Scarab and then goes on to fly to get from behind Scarab to just try to drop him down. We have Set that goes up against Nefertina. We go on to have Anubis that goes up against Wrath. And every single one of these ends up just having the mummies go on and defeat said dogs easily. So we'd go on, and eventually when they defeat them, all of a sudden, like, their appearances start to glow, and then they disappear. Armand has to go up against these two other dogs, and he's in a fight with throwing rocks. So these two dogs, they go on and they throw rocks for then Armand to get this much bigger rock to throw at them, and that's what destroys them. As Anubis and Wrath are kind of sword fighting here, and Anubis goes on to get Wrath's swords away from him, and Anubis thinks that he's kind of got Wrath on the run here. Wrath all of a sudden has his snake sword turn into a snake and go on and attack Anubis and take him out. Kind of clever here. Like, I like that idea of even this guy's weapons can turn into snakes and assist him in this fight, which I thought was really cool. So now we have Demut, the only four-legged, weird, goofy-looking, monsterish thing. And we have the cat facing off against him. And we have at one point where Presley is to fall onto this cliff with all the battling going on. And we have Jakal that whips out his wings to then fall for Presley to save him. So Nefertina is to face off against Set here. Set goes on and says, like, well, if we don't win this fight, at least I can hope that I can destroy you. So obviously we'd go on to have Nefertina that goes on to take out Set here as they're hanging on this cliff. And And Nefertina goes on and uses her, I think, her claw-like weapons here, and kind of takes out Set here. I'm not quite sure exactly how this plays out because I'd watched this the night before, as well as also like I slept and then I went into this review, so there's a little things a little bit hazy here. So somebody can correct me in the comments below. So hour and 30 minutes. Wow, this is a way too long to describe this whole bit of episodes. Plus, also, I think this is in the third episode, so I still have one more episode to go. Me, whatever. So, Scarab goes on with Demut and just kind of runs away here. And so, as Presley is to reunite with all the mummies, and J- uh, Jakal is to mention how important Presley is to him, and mention how Jakal is to feel like a father to Presley. Presley's like, well, that's all good and great and all, but I already had a dad. But if anything, you can be my mummy daddy, and I'm fine with that. So we kind of end the episode with a bit of a joke here. So Presley goes on and makes his way back to his tent to finally get some sleep as he's been fighting all night. And Amanda finds it funny how Presley is to be sleeping so soundly when he's already been sleeping for a whole entire night, not knowing what was going on whatsoever because Amanda slept while Presley fought. So, or really just ran away. So, we now cut to Scarab, and Demott is holding out his paws or his hands, hoping that Scarab will not destroy him. And so we'll come to find that Demut ends up being kind of like the another extra animal thing for just Scarab to just kind of have on him for the following of these episodes, which is just kind of interesting. So, if anything, this Demut character like visually just does not look interesting enough to really keep him here, but for whatever reason he's still here. So, and they cut to credits shortly thereafter that. So now the fourth episode, The Gift of Geb. So we have Stone going on to be by this massive cauldron, and we have both Heka uh and Demut in the scene here. Um so we'd have Stone that is mentioning how he's found more gray hairs, that he's starting to become old. And so Stone is needing to go on and figure out a way to become immortal. So he needs to figure out the quickest way of being able to do that. So Stone goes on to realize, or Scarab goes on to realize, that he needs to go on and he needs to unleash Geb. And Geb will go on and flush out the boy who holds the Pharaoh's spirit. As well as also Scarab realizing that the eclipse will go on and be working ever so in his favor also. And Scarab is to go on and pronounce that as if he's General Zod from Man of Steel so consistently within this episode. And so as Scarab is holding this globe in his hands. So we then cut to Presley with Jakal, who is practicing this boomerang. It's a boomerang, and it's to be thrown. And so, as Presley is to go on and get trained by Jakal on this weaponry, we'll come to find out that actually Presley will use this weapon to assist him in some part of this episode. So, Arma is to just be cooking up a storm. And And so Presley is going on to Wrath and trying to figure out what it all means by the Pharaoh within inside of Presley, and if that means that somehow Presley can have powers to assist the mummies or to just save himself. And so, if anything, they're trying to figure that out, but if anything, they're not really exactly sure how to unleash this power. But if anything, Presley doesn't even know if he really does have any kind of power. And they're like, well, hey, look at your necklace. Like, it's glowing. Like, there obviously has to be something that is going on with that to make you realize that you do have some kind of power. Also, Presley in the pilot episode was glowing when he was in the museum, so there has to be something that is going to say that Presley is going to get powers, right? Like, it only makes sense to draw that conclusion. But if anything, I hope that that power transformation happens sooner rather than later. Because if anything, that's the biggest problem I feel of this show, is just the fact that Presley does not have powers. So, all of a sudden there's a rumble, there's a shake going on within this world, and the mummies don't know what's going on, and so Presley explains that it's an earthquake. So here is where Scarab is a call out for Geb, and Geb appears over this bridge. So Geb appears to ask Scarab who is to have awakened him, and Scarab is to mention that Rapses has gone on to have awakened him. And so Geb is a call upon that he's going to destroy this whole city to get to him. So uh so if anything, Scarab is to hope that this is going to bring an end to Rapses, and yeah, okay. So uh we then cut to Preston. Preston is to say to the mummies that this was just an earthquake. San Francisco has them all the time. And so as the as the mummies are talking, they're strangely talking about gas leaks and all kinds of things. And so a lot of this dialogue is just kind of lost on me in this episode. So I guess, cause, like, in the very much later episodes, it's kind of hard to eventually decipher what the heck is going on. Just because, like, I only have so much memory, as well as also there's a lot of times where I kind of bite off more than I can chew. And I should be going on and doing a lesser amount of episodes, but I decided to do a lot more. And there's not every bit of episodes that have, like, the best amount of things that I retained from, so my apologies for my lack of just understanding every bit of what's going on in every one of these episodes. So so Presley makes his way back, or makes his way to school, as we'd come to find that there is some video going on in the background of it. And so Presley is to bring this textbook to his teacher, because Presley was to have gone on and used his science textbook to explain to the mummies what's going on. And eventually, once Presley goes on to make his way to this textbook, he finds that it's ripped in half. So Presley then goes on to take this textbook and bring it to his teacher, and the teacher kind of disciplines Presley for going on and to have ripped his textbook in half. And so Scarab in the background goes on and claims of the eclipse going on and being able to give him great power. And so Presley is just overhearing that video, and then we cut to the mummies. So the mummies are trying to figure out where they should strike next. And Jakal is going on and thrusting out arrows saying that they need to strike north, west, east, and south. They need to just strike in every direction. That doesn't seem like a really good planned out leadership path, but if anything. So Presley is to go on and appear and say that it's far too dangerous for the mummies to go on and to make their presence known. And so as Presley makes his way to the mummies, let me pause here 1 second. All right. So Presley is to be very tempted to finally give up his spirit of Rapses to Scarab, and the mummies are unwilling to give up. If anything, they're to go on and continue on fighting and go for the hunt. So we'd have Presley that makes his way back to his mother, Amanda. And Amanda's looking at Presley and realizing how stressed out he is. And is to realize that he has like the weight of the world on his shoulders, and Presley's like, well, yeah, I pretty much have just that. So Amanda is telling Presley not to worry, and so that if anything, the eclipse is coming very soon tomorrow, and if anything, a thing like that never hurt anybody. And Presley's like, well, I know about that. Also, Presley's going on and asking his mother if she's at the museum, say around a certain time period, if anything, there's a place for her to go on and be safe there. Because, of course, with all of things kind of kicking off, if anything, Presley's hoping that his mother is going to be okay, which it seems that she will be. So Presley goes on and makes his way back to the mummies. And so Presley is going on and telling the mummies that he wants to be a part of this, that he wants to go on and kick some tut too. And if anything, Scarab is just using Geb to draw the mummies out. And so this, like, basically saying that this is all a trap and the mummies have to act upon it. That they need to go on and they need to face off against Geb because otherwise he'll destroy the city. So if anything, the mummies need to be guided by the pyramid of where to go next. And so Jakal goes on and is to be talking with Presley as Presley goes on and takes his boomerang into his backpack that he'll use later. So we have the mummies that get into the Annihilator, and the Annihilator, of course, is to be their Egyptian boat. And they boat their way to make to Jeb, who's within this water, or Geb. So as Geb ruckuses or appears from out of the water to scare the mummies here, we go on to have the mummies go into acting. So we would go on to, of course, have Jakal that calls upon the power of Ra, uses his bows and arrows multiple times to hit the shoulder of Geb, and weirdly, these arrows just turn into trees to be on top of Geb, which makes no sense. We then go on and just have the Annihilator that uses its gun like weapons to blast onto Geb, seemingly having none of this having any real true effect here. So, all of a sudden, off in the distance, they find that Scarab has a boat making its way over here. And so, what the mummies decide to do is they decide to use this boat as a way to smash into Geb, which is a kind of a smart strategy because of how big this boat is. But also, like, it's just like it's not really effective of like them going on and having some of their power. Like, they just find some random boat and are to use it to, like, it just kind of just doesn't really seem all that cool. So Jakal goes inside of Scarab's massive boat and starts to take out all the Shabtis within it, and then guides the boat to then smash into Geb. So as the boat smashes into Geb, we then would go on to have Jakal that flies up and inevitably is to end up losing his power. So Scarab ends up appearing and swooping in to grab Jakal before he falls, and all the rest of the mummies are looking on to realize, like, oh, like Jakal has now lost his power, and so we now have Scarab that's holding on to Jakal into the air, and Wrath, Nefertina, and Armand are to go on and realize that they need to recharge their power, because all of them are to be fairly weakened, even though Jakal was doing most of the heavy lifting in this fight. So they all go on to make their way into their coffins to rest, and there's a whole joke about them being dead on their feet. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, it's funny. So we'd have Presley that gets on his bike to make his way to the bridge to sacrifice himself for Jakal. So as we come to find that Presley is making his way to Jakal, we have the rest of the mummies that are to make their way back to the Annihilator to get to the bridge. And they call upon their powers of Ra. So Presley makes his way to Jakal and is to start the incantation to sacrifice himself as the rest of the mummies come in and start attacking the Shabtis. So as Presley realizes that the rest of the mummies are there, he doesn't go on and he doesn't finish the incantation. If anything, he goes on and he says, like, well, yeah, I'll go on and I'll kick butt, or that the mummies will go on and kick butt. So the Scarab goes on and holds Presley over the bridge and is to threaten him to finish the incantation. And so what then happens is Presley ends up saying, like, well, hey, you know what, I have a question. And so Scarab is like, okay, what is the question? And so Presley's like, okay, who is to have been the one to have woken Jeb? And Scarab is like, well, I woke up Jeb. And then all of a sudden Jeb appears. He's very upset that Scarab had got on to have woken him originally instead of saying that it was Rapsies. So Gab goes on to grab said Scarab and take him to this portal underneath this bridge. Uh, it was also interesting that the mummies could go on and be able to see the visuals of this bridge more so than anyone else is, because the visuals of the bridge would change from the mummy's view to what is actually there, which is kind of cool. So after Jeb would leave with the scarab, the mummies would then turn back to their normal mummified selves. So as they'd all kind of gather together, we would go on to, by the end of the episode, have them tease that it's like, well, it's only going to be a matter of time before Scarab finds a way to escape from Geb and try to go after us again. But they're like, hey man, like let's just go on and just kind of like relish in our victory. Like let's just go on and just appreciate the day. So if anything, Armand is telling specifically Wrath to cheer up as he accidentally knocks him over this bridge and so he falls. So they have Armand pull out this rope to save Wrath, and by the end of the episode they cut to one of the characters going on and speaking about how this is a very weird time, and then credits roll. Whew! Thank goodness. If anything, it's gonna suck because I'm gonna have to fuse clips together, but oh well. Because I accidentally like tried to pause this, and then when I got back to it, it just completely stopped. So that's great. But yeah, at least I got this done. I tried to do this last night, and I started I was just not awake enough to get it. The last 2 days, like there's a lot of fireworks going off late into the night, so I didn't want to press to like hope that I can get away with getting around fireworks. So I decided to just kind of nix doing videos for the last 2 days because I tend to have neighbors that just light off fireworks just all the time around 4th of July. Like I was kind of surprised that they weren't firing fireworks off tonight, because yeah, like 4th of July, it seems like is just a week to people instead of just one singular day. Um, but also, you get the people that always just are to be complaining about fireworks because obviously it's around this time period. But anyways, so thank goodness I was to go on and get this done. And now I can upload this. That's great. Hopefully, people will check this out and have a bit of fun with this content and find it and watch it if they've never seen it before. Uh, but I'm hoping that I can go on and finally dig my way out of finding some kind of bit of content that people will actually be interested in. If anything, I'm just making the poor decisions of just kind of going to these random bits of cartoons that probably no one has ever heard of. But I'm having a lot of fun going actually into this superhero of stuff that is to kind of also be tied into supernatural stuff that I really do enjoy and love. So this is cool. Like I hope that people absolutely like this cartoon and want me to watch more of it to see where this goes. I hope, but at the end of the day, I can just be so happy that I found this bit of content because it was like a really cool idea. I feel, if anything, yeah, like hopefully at some point there could be a way of resurrecting this show or just come up with a similar idea and kind of run with it. I maybe wouldn't say resurrect the show because if anything, like if you do the exact same show, like I would not go on and have that be the idea. Like if anything, like I would kind of do this show like I would probably have done Gargoyles. Like if anything, that makes a lot heckin' more sense than what they did in the show. Like they basically made the girl character, the detective from Gargoyles, the lead character, and like the Gargoyles became the side character for this show. Like that was kind of a very ass backwards way about going about this show. To have Presley be the focus instead of the mummies. Like that was the biggest problem of this show. But I get it that they were trying to appeal to their target audience, but nobody wants to go on and nobody wants to be the kid character in any cartoon. Uh unless the kid character becomes the superhero. Like yeah, like it's probably the reason why of which that this show eventually failed. But if anything also the show was probably just meant to fail anyways. It was probably just meant to be content for the sake of putting out content. Because if anything, there wasn't probably much thought really put into this show. Besides, hey, yeah, like we have this mummy idea because I went to the museum with my kids and it sounded like they were to go on and find this the most interesting. So let's just make just a mummy cartoon. And there was not much thought besides that. Plus, also, there wasn't probably much thought of me going on and figuring out a way to talk about every one of these episodes at a certain point. But regardless, I tried my best. I hope that people will go on and find a way to latch on to this or like this. And hopefully, I'll go on and be able to keep making content from the day to day. I'm going to try to swing back into getting into more workouts every other day, but if anything, I'm going to keep trying to figure out what could be the next enticing thing to put on this channel. But if anything, I think it's about that time to say it's time for me to get the heck out of here so I can go on and kind of do my daily stuff. So thank you for watching this because I do appreciate this of people going on and figuring out a way to help this channel out or going on and just like to have also found a show like this. Yeah, I thought this was cool too, or yeah, I watched this when I was a kid, or yeah, da da da. And like we can kind of connect with that and just have a fun time with a weird, wacky show like this. So that's how to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.